Hey guys, welcome back to the Beer Bastards. I'm going to do my first review today. I spent a considerable amount of time determining which beer I should review first. Just kidding, I came to a clear-cut decision. Guinness Draught. And then, there you go. This guy. Hopefully you have a Guinness. If so, join me. If not, go get one, because I'm going to provide a bit of a history lesson on this too, both on the beer and myself after, we go through all this kind of stuff. So usually I'd be, drinking a stout more out of a standard type of stout glass, but for all intents and purposes, a Guinness glass is perfectly fine. So here we're going to pour. Now you notice we're going to get, about a finger or two of head there, which is pretty standard for a Guinness stout. Now the color of the head is kind of like a tannish or off-white color. So, and then with the body being like a nice, deep kind of dark black. And then the nose, smell it, you get a nice like scent of malts, a little hint of coffee and chocolate that's common to kind of the most stouts. The nice thing though is, but they're not, so like the flavors aren't very prominent, but the nice thing is that like what you smell is what you're going to get out of the beer. It's not going to smell like one thing and then taste like something completely different. So for the mouthfeel, when you taste it, that's going to be a little, kind of creamy as stouts typically are, but it's a little more watery and thinner than a lot of stouts are. It does have like a nice kind of like slight bitter from like the chocolate and coffee that comes out of it, with kind of like a slight malty front, and then the coffee bitter really comes in at the back, and it just kind of finishes off a little dry and bitter. And all of these, as I said, all of these flavors are blended together well, so the taste is very pleasing and nothing's like kind of clashing. So with that being said, like Guinness Draught is more kind of like a medium, closer to like a medium body beer than a lot of stouts typically are these days, where they're pretty dark and pretty heavy. As far as like drinking it goes, like I would say, if you got somebody who's into beer drinking and they're not sure, like, okay, do I want to get a stout or not, like a Guinness is a pretty good staple to get people started on, because it's nothing too overpowering. So it's a good beer to open up somebody's eye to. So, and the best part is it's really not a bank breaker. I personally rate this beer about like a 7 out of 10. That's what I'm going to give it today. So let's, while we're drinking this, let's go over, I'd like to go over a little bit of history with, about the Guinness Brewery. So it all began in Ireland in the year 1725 with the birth of one Arthur Guinness. At the age of 27, he inherited about 100 pounds to start a brewery in Leixlip County, Kildare, brewing ales. That is odd. I have music going. Okay, ignore that. Ignore all of that. My phone is being a pain in the butt here. Normally this doesn't happen. Oh, somebody's trying to call me. That's why everything is going crazy. Sorry about that. Anywho, so as I was saying, he started brewing in Leixlip County, Kildare, brewing ales. 7 years later, in 1759, he decided to move his operations into Dublin. He ultimately signed a 9,000-year lease for a rundown property at St. James's Gate on December 31st that year. He later switched gears to darker beers after encountering imported London porters, while still producing ales to a lesser extent. By the year 1803, Arthur Guinness II inherited the brewery from after his father passed away. Arthur II began exporting his father's porter in 1821. The brewery officially recorded the recipe for the now named Guinness Superior Porter in 1821. This is the precursor to the Guinness Original and Extra Stout. In 1850, Arthur Guinness II passed ownership to his son, Sir Benjamin Lee Guinness. Under his tenure, the company had expanded and exported beer to several locations around the world, even going as far as New Zealand. It wasn't until after all of this success that the brewing company adopted the official seal containing the name of the brewery, Arthur Guinness's signature, and most notably, the heart symbol that you see on pretty much any Guinness beer. So, about after 6 more years of successful business, Edward Guinness, aka Edward Cecil, took over as the head of the business and doubled the size of the brewery. The property contained various amounts of amenities that people and workers referred to it as a city within a city. In 1893 to 1901, Guinness hired 2 Oxford chemists, Thomas Bennett Case and Alexander Forbes Watson. The former began innovating and later modernizing the facilities and creating experimental stations. This began paving the way for more of their modernized beers. Fast forward a few decades to 1959, and we meet a man by the name of Michael Ash. He was single-handedly responsible for the invention of the nitro beer using a combination of nitrogen and carbon dioxide gases. This gave rise to the commonly known Guinness Draught, right here. In the year 1988, Guinness developed what was later called the widget. This device allowed canned Guinness straw to retain its taste via in-can nitrogenation. It eventually won the Queen's Award for Technological Achievement, deeming it the greatest invention over the past 4 decades, beating out, yes, the internet. After 11 years, Guinness included this for use into its bottle version of the draught using a different formation called the rocket widget. So that brings us to, this guy that we have. So why do I like this beer so much? Well, prior to this guy, my exposure to beer was very limited. My first taste of beer was either Miller High Life or Miller Genuine Draft when I was probably 6. I was one of those kids who asked his dad, "Can I have a taste of your beer?" persistently. I didn't care how many times he said no. I really wanted to taste his beer because I know I wasn't allowed to have it and I wanted it. I think I get my stubbornness from my dad because it took him about a year before he finally gave in. I distinctly remember this specific incident as it was in the summer and he was grilling dinner. I always joined him outside because I was able to annoy him instead of my mom. Oh, that and play catch and stuff like that. So he gave in one day while tending to the grill and says, "You sure? You're not going to like it." "I don't care," I answered. Well, he handed Miller High Life his Miller High Life or Genuine Draft, whatever it was, over to me. I grabbed it and hastily took a nice big swig, swallowed about half of it before I immediately spat the other half out. I handed the beer back to him, ran inside, and washed my mouth. Pretty sure he was just laughing and shaking his head at the maneuver. If he wasn't laughing then, he was when my mom asked if I was going to do that again. I think you all know what my answer was. Well, I stayed dry the whole way through high school, probably due to my family living in a bubble community. It wasn't until I was in college that I drank beer for the first time, really. I was mostly tagging with a couple of people who went into different house parties on the weekends. And by weekend, I meant Thursday night. I went to a small college suitcase where everybody went home every weekend. The town was almost dead during that time, so there were no parties. But at these Thursday parties, they had kegs of some of the cheapest beer they could get. I admitted bits that I liked it. I mean, I really didn't have any reference point outside of when I was 6 years old, and it just kind of grew on me after a while. I didn't do much beer drinking throughout my sophomore and junior year. Instead, it was more hard liquor. My roommate was of age and I wasn't, so we just kind of worked things out that way. we'd mostly hang out either just the two of us or with a couple of friends, trying to keep tomfoolery to the minimum as much as we could while living in the dorms. When I got to my senior year, my friend's fiance had an apartment. We spent a night there on a couple of occasions, and this is when he asked me if I liked beer. I told him, no, the only beer I've had was at house parties, and I really don't like it. Finally, being honest to myself. He pulls out a six-pack of Guinness Stout from his fridge and starts demanding I drink one. Again, I can be extremely stubborn. It turns out that he was more stubborn than I was, and a bit more persuasive. He stops trying to convince me by pouring a bottle into a glass. I'm certain I had a look of disgust on my face, mostly due to me listening to a comedy sketch and hearing that person's take on Guinness. Spoilers, it wasn't flattering. He says, just take a drink. If you don't like it, you don't have to drink the rest of it, and I won't ever bug you about this again. I figured, okay, I'll take you up on this bet. So I take the glass, stare at it a few seconds, kind of like, and like sip, like. And then I had that look of epiphany on my face, kind of like, wow, that's actually pretty good. Ever since then, I like beer. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, my review, and a little personal story as to why I came to like beer, and all thanks to the Guinness Stout. If you liked what you saw and heard, feel free to just like and subscribe. If you want updates on videos or projects we have going into the future, follow us on Twitter at thebeerbastards.com. At the Beer Bastards, sorry. Also, friend us on Untappd.com as Beer Bastards. That way you can check out what beers we rated, reviewed, and featured, and all that stuff. If you haven't seen my intro video, please check that out. Leave any comments and feedback you have below, as well as any beers or video ideas you would like to see us cover. Stay thirsty, bastards.